our two previous panel. And I think this one, which is exploring the future of the Muridiyya in the US, and in particular paying a lot of attention to Ndawi Serigne Touba, which is the youth movement of Touba, is really fitting this discussion, is a follow-up of the discussion, because it's about looking at what are the lessons of Ahmadou Bamba and how we are carrying it in particular in a space which is different from the space in which not only it's emerged, but the space in which it's developed. So what the panel is going to interrogate is the intersectional dimensions of immigration, African ethnicity and identity, Blackness and religion. And it's about really how religiosity and what people have learned, in particular for parents, are traveling here, and how it is shaping the identity of which second generation, not only Murids, but of West African. It's about home, it's about ethnicity, it is about religion. So, and the presentation will be given by Jonathan Bowman, who is a PhD candidate from Middlesex University in London. And I think that we'll have also a presentation and comment by Mohamed Galayai and by Hadim Bousso. And after that, we will open the discussion. So what I would like to do is to give the floor to Jonathan to give his presentation. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Well, assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everyone, everywhere. I really want to thank all the organizers for inviting me to participate in celebrating Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba Day in North America. Great privilege. I'm also just want to greet the esteemed members of this panel, and I really look forward to your contributions. Before I begin, just a few words about myself. Many of you know me. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I work as a consultant for Christian-Muslim relations. From 1999 to 2009, I lived and worked in Senegal. More recently, I've done my research in Harlem. I just want to say thank you to all the people that helped me, housed me, fed me, answered my questions, and made me feel really welcome. I love the New York Murid community. And on the subject of this, this particular panel, I would say right off the top, the future is bright for Murids. And so my presentation really is going to come in that light. The Ndawi Serigne Touba Facebook page says they are a religious organization aimed at spreading the work of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, Khadimur Rasul, through events, community support, community service, and peer support. The president of NST described their mission to me as dawah to lost African youth, and that they would find a way to become useful, productive citizens by following the example of Bamba. NST really burst onto the scene in New York in the 2017 Bamba Day parade when they wore matching uniforms and served the community. And I'm having trouble with my notes. And Ndao means either youth or ambassador. And in the case of NST, they're quite deliberately meaning both. They're young ambassadors of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. Calling themselves youth, they position themselves in society, and really it's about leading a counter discourse. Living in the diaspora, they experience freedoms that they would not have in Senegal, and they escape some of the control of family and society structures and live in a new geography. I'm quoting Dr. Juf. In America, they're Murids by choice, and they describe themselves as sometimes being victims of racism and violence. At the same time, they're positioning themselves in their local context and attempting to lead a counter discourse about being young Muslims in America. Many of NST members are elites with American college degrees. Oh my, I'm having so much trouble with this mouse. Pardon me. Yes, my mouse was giving me trouble. NST was birthed out of intergenerational tensions, and the idea of youth as a social shifters might clarify the situation of NST and their context within the Muridiyya and the larger society of New York. They're aware of power differences between them and their elders, between them and Mika, between themselves and American society. And they're creating ways to tip that imbalance just a bit in their favor. They do this by being the best murids they know how, serving to the greatest extent, and winning a place for themselves. By creating a youth movement with enough momentum and energy, they gained attention from Shaykh Ahmadou, and they've moved themselves as youth from being undesired to desired. So I'm going to talk a lot about the kind of shifts that they've created. And by seeing them as social shifters, it's a kind of a powerful analytic tool to interrogate the ways that they point out imbalances and bring awareness to things hidden. They're situated in a very dynamic context, and their position allows them to see opportunities that the first generation of Murids may not have seen. They're ready to cross boundaries and mediate contradictions about being Sufi Muslim youth in a pluralistic and non-religious world. I could talk a lot about transnationality and locality. It's present throughout this discussion, but I'll just note that NST is a transnational religious organization, but they're locally rooted in Harlem. So issues of transnationality and locality are sharply in play. Tensions between Touba and Harlem, between Senegalese Wolof cultural forces and American cultural pluralistic realities of Harlem are shaping Murid youth. NST is a daira, and Momar Kumba described three purposes for the daira: to serve the needs of the sheikh, to serve the needs of the talibe, and to promote Murid ideology. So using these three categories, I'm going to look briefly at NST. First, the needs of the sheikh. The daira helps this communication happen. Understanding the Sheikh-Taliban relationship is important to understanding NST. This is completely on display, say at the JFK International Airport, where NST members joined other Murids to welcome Sheikh Ahmadou, and who's also had multiple private meetings with them. The second role of the daira is to meet the needs of the Taliban, who live scattered across the city in an often hostile environment. For young Murids in New York, the daira offers community and belonging. For many members, NST is the primary circle of relationship and belonging in New York. They place a high value on helping newcomers get started in the community. By sharing food and housing and many other things, they create a Murid space, a place of belonging and safety and security, which I've discovered in my own research is probably one of the more significant things. This communal space where you feel secure, you know what your identity is, becomes a social mechanism for peacemaking, because it's out of that security that you have the ability to then relate to the religious other or the non-religious other. A third function of the daira is to promote Murid ideology, and NST members express this in three primary ways, I would say: khidma, dawah, and living the Yonu Jam. Yonu Jam I translate in my research to mean nonviolence or path of peace. First, khidma. This is the most visible element of NST. You see them serving the community at events, organizing, cleaning up, preparing food. And as you know, service to one's sheikh and service to one's family and fellow Murids and society is really the essence of being a Murid, because by doing that service, you're serving khidmatul khadim, and thus you're in the service of the Prophet. So NST has focused a lot of its activity in that realm. Sociologically speaking, you could say that NST members are using their bodies as weapons or tools. By dressing in matching uniforms, they insert themselves into the middle of the most important events in the Murid community, Bamba Day, the Magal, and this causes everyone to recognize them and value them as ambassadors of Serigne Touba. Dawah. NST carries a strong sense of dawah, and I've experienced a warm, compelling invitation to become a Muslim every time I was with them, to join NST, join the Murids in New York. Their president described dawah as their first and foremost mission to lost Senegalese, but including all people, Muslim and non-Muslim. He said, we have an example of the forgiveness of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, whose example shows us how we should live, and so we desire to share that with others. It appears to me that their commitment to dawah is stronger in NST than in Mika Murid community in general. NST members adhere to Murid tradition, and at the same time they bring a critique. They believe that as a new generation with different opportunities, education, the benefit of their parents' work, they can take the Muridiyya to new levels of success. So dawah and conversion are core parts of NST's mission. And I would say they feel that the older generation has not understood or integrated into the American context sufficiently to have such an effective witness. And nonviolence. A third way that NST promotes Murid ideology is the way they live Yonu Jam. Nonviolence is an essential part of Murid ideology, and in New York, a chosen public identity for the New York diaspora. It makes a lot of sense in the context of New York and the American situation. During Ramadan 2018, an NST member was shot in the stomach just outside Daraji on 116th Street. This event and the way people talked about it has been very instructive to me. I got to see how people wrestle with a violent event as faithful Muslims and as faithful disciples of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. The victim emphasized that he was trying to calm people down, trying to stop a fight. He got shot, but that was something God allowed to happen. So that kind of removes the need to blame or seek revenge. And the communal response to this act of violence appears to have been to trust that the police will do their jobs and to pronounce forgiveness. Calling on the example of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. And additionally, in the community meetings I've seen and the talk I've had with many people I've interviewed about this, the question isn't so much about who was this person or why did they commit this act of violence, but it's much more an internal question. How could have our young people got in such a troubling situation, and how could we get them to join NST? So Murids of NST members, in Harlem, are living into this narrative of being nonviolent Muslims with a witness to offer to others. How would I define an American Murid? It's like, how would you define an American Christian? And in one sense, I want to say, well, we are purely Christian. We are, that's separate from being American. But the reality is, when I travel to other countries, I meet Christians in Africa, and they behave and act differently than I do. And so when I say American Murid, I'm saying it's not something about changing Islam in its core, but it's how do American Murids live that's different than maybe their brothers and sisters in Senegal. So the emergence of an American Muridiyya is not what I was expecting to find when I did my research in Harlem. I was really just looking for Senegalese people living in New York City, and maybe how they remain true to their origins. Young Murids in NST with a portion of their education in Senegal and another port in the United States know that they're no longer immigrants, no longer migrants. They want to and intend to make their life in New York, Atlanta, or Columbus. They're Americans. And as Murids Touba's still their permanent cardinal north of the spiritual compass, but their everyday concerns are oriented towards life and work in New York City, not Senegal. So I characterize American Murids as those who are American citizens by birth or naturalization, who went to high school or university in the States and are fluent in English. These American Murids thrive in a transnational space that's oriented spiritually towards Touba, but settled in America. They're 100% committed to Bamba. They possess the ritual mastery and skills needed to transform and adapt Murid ritual to American context. They carry a very strong JN, Shaykh Abdullah J. They carry quite an influence from him in terms of how they approach their religious life in America. They want to make Bamba known everywhere, share his spiritual and ethical philosophy. They engage in khidma, dawah, and peacemaking. So to conclude, NST has chosen to work from within the Murid community, to utilize traditional Murid structures and rituals, faithfully adhering to the teachings and practice of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. There are challenges and growing pains ahead, but it's clear that these young ambassadors of Serigne Touba are shifting the position of Murid youth in Harlem and beyond. Their clothing, their use of religious objects to announce their presence to all. They use their bodies to serve their community and to claim contested spaces. In all these activities, they call attention to things they would like to change, things they think could be done better. Young ambassadors of Serigne Touba have shifted both their position in the community and the community of themselves, itself. They've moved from being non-participants to participants, from no leadership to leading and founding their own new daira. They've changed dynamics about how, Sheikh Mamour, when he comes to New York, he doesn't just meet with the older traditional dairas. Now he's meeting with the youth as well. They've moved from being unofficial to official. They have a 501c3 organization, and they're pressing into a much more aggressive and strong invitation to Islam and to being Murid. Any visitor in the community will experience that. The young ambassadors of Serigne Touba continue to hold to Murid commitments to peace and nonviolence. And the ways they live and express this commitment to nonviolence is a strong element of their life as Murids. They're participating in the Murid witness that Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba was a Muslim peacemaker. But this rests in somewhat of a tension with their strong call to dawah. And how will they balance this peacemaking and a rather aggressive, sometimes aggressive witness? So Murid youth in New York are seizing their place in the larger New York diaspora. They're youth who are negotiating what it means to be faithful Muslims, faithful Murids, and Americans. Their ancestors shaped most of the last 40 years of the Murid presence in New York, and now they're going to shape the next season. Thank you, and I turn it back to you, Dr. Juf.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So he has presented a very rich paper, which is a kind of sociology, but also an understanding of the emergence of what he called, an American Muridiyya, and has actually signaled very precisely the manifestation of such an identity, which is a new identity in the space, which is in particular the space of Harlem. So what I would like to do now is to ask, I don't know if he's around, Mohamed Galainyai, to comment if he's connected. I haven't seen his name.
Professor Galai isn't on, but you can invite Dr. Hadim.
Busso, absolutely. I was doing that. Gala is not around, I will ask Dr. Hadim Bousso, who is a member of the Murid Islamic Community of America, MICA, to give us his presentation and comments. So you have a floor, Hadim Bousso.
Yeah, I also don't see him in the group. Let's see if Binta Job is on the call. Looks like she's also not on.
They both here. They both here. They just have their device mute right now, but they are both here.
Okay, thank you. Can you unmute, please?
To unmute. So CD, what do you suggest? What do we do?
We can proceed with question.
Okay, I think we can begin with question. What I would like to say in order to set the stage very quickly is that Jonathan, the main idea of Jonathan is to postulate that, you know, an American Muridiyya exists. And one thing which is interesting, if you compare what he is doing, looking at the NST and what had been done years ago, the scholarship on Murid migrants, and Sheikh Babu was part of the important contributor to the discussion, is we are seeing a shift. Is that we are seeing a shift where Sheikh and many of the scholars of his generation has paid attention to is people who had been mainly quote unquote non-educated workers. These were mainly traders. The shift you are introducing.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Dr. Youth is muted.
Dr. Diouf, you can proceed.
No. Okay. Okay.
You can go ahead, Hadim.
If Sin Khadim is talking, he's muted. I'm sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Oh, okay. Can I start? I hope the host is hearing me. Assalamu alaikum.
Who would like to intervene?
Alaikum salam. You know, like Singh Khadim. Yeah, we hear you very clear.
Man dama dem, huh?
Okay, is Hadim Busso
Oh,
around?
okay. Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm here.
you have a floor.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On behalf of the Murid Islamic community in America, warmest greetings to all participants and members of this panel. Expression of great gratitude also to the organizers of this conference for the opportunity offered to meet and discuss about the various objectives, particularly the present and future of Muridiyya and the diaspora. I thank you, Jonathan, because of the topic that he chose, and we really appreciate what he said. Talking about Ndawi Serigne Touba should not be a brief presentation topic, especially for social sciences and studies, urban youth movement for social change and religious revival. In this particular case of NST, I will highlight their points as contribution. The important role that NST must play in the growth and spreading of the peaceful and motivation message of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, any group within the Muridiyya, especially newly founded organization, regardless of its location, should undergo the appropriation process of all fundamental. To most of these young men and women involved with NST are second or third generation American-born Murid citizen. They are reading themselves as every good citizen to serve their community, because they was born American citizen. This opportunity, our grandfathers doesn't have this. They don't have this opportunity to born American and speaking the language. They don't have any trouble for the language. The reason that can help them to bring the American people don't care about white people, black people, or young people or old people. Only the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. We have to show this to American people, to bring them, to take them from their community to our community, and help people to understand the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. That is peace and love that we learn from Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba Khadim Rasul. This is what I want to participate for the first time. Thank you.
Dr. Jove, your mic is muted. You got to unmute it.
So thank you very much for Hadim Busso for your intervention and your presentation of the mission of the NST. I don't know if our colleague Galanya is around.
Actually, Binta Job is here. Binta, can you unmute? And
she
for
was here, yeah.
Yeah,
Can
she's
you
right
unmute?
here. Yeah, just unmute. And please, for all those that are attending, turn your camera off, and please do not unmute your phone or mic until you were given the floor. As a participant, meeting the, if you don't mute your phone, we will just remove you from the call. But please mute and shut your camera off. Binta Job, you can go ahead. You have to unmute. You're still muted. Okay,
hello,
good.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you are fine. Go ahead.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. On behalf of NNST, my name is Binta Job and I am a founding member of the Ndawi Serigne Touba. Today I bring greetings from our Jawrin Serigne Josimbai, the board of director of Jawrin of Ndawi Serigne Touba, but also from all the Muslim Murid youth living in the United States of America. So much for such a wonderful, a great discourse and a great, presentation about the Ndawi Serigne Touba. I strongly believe that this is quite honestly the greatest gift we can give to a youth movement, especially putting it in writing, but also giving us such details about how we came about as young Murids. As you were speaking, I think one thing that really caught my attention was the fact that you did mention that the Ndawi Serigne Touba did have an identity that was transnational, but also the pluralism that we could see in our movement. I can tell you that the beginning, our movement mentioned that so beautifully in your article. We came about really out of a need. This is something that was bigger than ourselves. I think the time where on July 23rd, 2017, when we met at the Central Park, Morningside Park for our barbecue, it was our soul yearning to be in touch with Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. I think the time is very small for me to elaborate on how we were able to display our thirst for the Murid Tariqa here in the United States. But I also wanted to really mention that NST, the Ndawi Serigne Touba, has a very particular side that I'm inviting everyone to pay attention to. And that's the platform that Ndawi Serigne Touba for the Muslim woman herself. With our community, with our organization, very early on given a platform to the woman in our society. We were part of the board membership, we were part of the decision making. But another aspect of NST is the social aspect of NST, where NST became a safe place, not just for peacemaking. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Shaykh Amba is the pinnacle of the embodiment of peace all over the world. However, we were able to embody that through our activities. And the example you gave with that man being shot is how we are living that peace on a daily basis. I owe our attention to the way that we are forming new lives. In NST, we see that with our activities, we were able to decrease unmarital interrelationship, if you will say. In NST, we were very successful into making the young people meet and get married and build the health. Within NST as well, we were able to build models. I need to remind, I am compelled right now to remind everyone that NST is really a model and a good service, not only for Senegalese Murids, but for American. Because most of the youngest may be around 12, the oldest you may see somewhere old. However, most of them are US citizens. These are the future leaders of America. And having the principles and the teachings of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba in the 20th century, right now with the world where Black Lives Matter, we are struggling for Black men. We are struggling to end the violence in New York. We are struggling to find a meaningful way to work. NST came through as an answer, and not only for the Murid community, but for the world as a whole. And I'm very grateful that we were able to support our progress through the article that Mr. Jonathan did with the help of MICA, the Murid Islamic community in America. I think before I end, to say that yes, we do have concern within, and its concern is really to have the resource. But our Jawrin, which is Serigne Josimbai, along with the board, shown the way, and the way that NST operates is really the words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, where he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So what we did is we took lines and we started creating avenues of development even before anybody got involved. Blessing for us to see that the minute we rose up, the elders came and gave us their stamp of approval. The minute we got up, we were able to see that Sheikh Serigne Mamour came and gave us his stamp of approval. So now NST is into a bigger platform. Sure, in the future of Muridism, according to us and into our own eyes, is how can we develop the Murid exponentially? How can we make Muridism in America which is creating an international university where all youth can identify in there and be able to do the true sense of khidmah, which is learning the westernized way of education, but applying also the teaching of the Sheikh and creating that bridge. So part of both teachings. Another of our future endeavors also has to do with really creating safe spaces. I think Mr. Jonathan, you touched upon that a little bit by saying that when we have the dara and we create that safe place for people, it's a means for us to create better peace. That at this time, NST definitely needs more of those safe spaces. I think one of our challenge is really how can we recognize that NST, most of our members are American citizens, and how can we make reservations for those US citizens, for those Americans, so that they can benefit from, like, let's say, like recreational centers, places where they can stay so that they can live the true identity of who they were born to be. I want to monopolize the discussion, but we are extremely grateful for this opportunity. We do thank Mika for this opportunity. For the support that we have received. Mr. Diouf, thank you so much for having us. And Mr. Jonathan, again, we are extremely appreciative. On behalf of all the members of the Ndawi Serigne Touba, we are thankful and we say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we pray for our Sheikh Serigne Muntaha for long life for him, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much, Peter Job. I think that you added to Jonathan's presentation and you engaged with some of the issues he raised. In particular, I think you gave us a kind of very powerful picture of the mission, NST members assign themselves. And again, the question you are raising, which resonates very well with what Jonathan was saying, is how do you inscribe Murid resources in a landscape where you have other groups, other values, other religious understanding. And in particular, what you insisted on is about a kind of American citizenship, which is informed by a tradition which is not a Western tradition, by a Muslim tradition which is also different from, quote unquote, the kind of global Muslim tradition. And I think that it's an important discussion to have also beyond the Murid community, because it's not, as you say, only about the Muslim community. It's about West Africans, it's about Muslims, it's about making the lesson of Ahmadou Bamba important and more important in the world scene. But one thing you intersect, the three of you, is your insistence on peace. And my question is, why such an insistence on peace? Because peace is but one aspect of Ahmadou Bamba's teaching. It's not the whole teaching of Bamba. Again, Sheikh Babu insists much more on the pedagogical aspect. and think that it is the heart of Ahmadou Bamba's intervention. I think these are questions around which we could open the floor and give the possibility of our colleagues to intervene before going back to Jonathan. So the floor.
You are on mute, Dr. Diouf, you are on mute.
I was saying one way of manifesting your desire to intervene, if you go to participant, you have an icon, which is a hand. And if you raise your hand, I can actually find you and give you the floor.
Yeah, or open your camera and then we'll give it to you.
So if nobody wants to talk, Jonathan, you have back the floor to react to many of the questions we talked about.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated the presentation from Serigne Khadim Bousso and from Binta Diop. Both of you, your contributions really added to what I had already shared. The question, why peace? Why did we all focus on peace? Very, very important, because in Senegal, peacemaking and nonviolence would not be a major emphasis of Murids. However, living in post 9/11 New York City, I believe Murids had to find a way to make themselves fit into an American society that was suddenly very hostile towards Islam and hostile towards Muslims. And they dug into their tradition and they find that they actually have a very powerful, long-standing witness about nonviolence from their founder. So embracing it makes perfect sense. And the other thing I want to say about Binta, your presentation, I also am very impressed at the role that women have played in NST. I've interviewed some of the women. I've seen your contributions, and so that's a very unique thing you bring as a daira and as a space for women to present themselves to and their gifts to the world. Might I add one more thing before I pass the mic over, and that is to say, I really have enjoyed researching the NST. Wow. Because you actually do have a contribution to make to American society. So you're gifted with two cultural heritages, and you're well-educated people. And right now, American society has a lot of questions about whether or not immigrants are welcome, whether or not they have an important role to play. And so highlighting something like peace and nonviolence, highlighting a Muslim group that has a place for women in leadership, means that you have a very attractive and interesting contribution to make to the larger American society. I'll stop there.
Hadim, you would like to say something? Yeah, you have the floor. Unmute. Unmute. Hadim.
Okay, I'm here. I'm sorry, because the first time I was speaking, I just think, I thought I have only 5 minutes. The reason why I made it so shortly, but I have something else to say. I was saying that the message of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba is universal. The nationality of the founder of the Muridiyya is universal. as the message of Islam in his many writing and teaching lessons. Like he say, "Inni ukhatibun nasara turran fi ardihim." I will speak to them in their own land. I will explain them the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the message of Allah is peace and love. The reason, one of the reasons why when Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba returned from the exile to his land, he said, I forgive everybody, because I don't want to do wrong to people. The reason why we are, as a Murid in Harlem, we bring peace to the community. Even the white American and the black American and the African American, they know that the message of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba is peace and love and gathering together and make the things clear and nicer and call people to Islam nicely. Don't do wrong to people. Even they are not Muslim, you have to respect them, to give them respect, to call them to Islam. The reason why, one of the reasons, most of people or many people, they every day returning to Islam, following the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba by the Ndawi, by the Sheikh of Serigne Touba, Ndawi Serigne Touba. One of the reasons the Muridiyya, the Murid Dawa is right now is the most dawa, the real dawa of Islam, because it's calling people to practice Islam by peace and love. This is what I was wondering to add again, and to remind the Ndawi Serigne Touba that what I mentioned before. Firstly, they are lucky because they was born Muslims and they was born American citizens, so they don't have a language problem. They don't have anything they don't have excuse to presenting and explaining the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. So they have to work hardly to bring people to Islam, but by peace and love, as I mentioned before. This is what I was wondering to add to my presentation lately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, Sincere. Well, yeah, I think I have a question for Mr. Jonathan, but before I proceed, I think it's very important for also to share the support that we've received from Serigne Khadim Bousso, who was an imam in New York at the time where we were when we were organizing, and also the elders of the community. So I just wanted to mention that before I proceed, because I forgot. But for Mr. Jonathan, I have a question, and my question has to do with what sparked the interest of your study for NST. In what sense did you see us different from other youth movements, Islamic youth movements per se? You know, there are so many varieties of youth movements in the United States, you know, that are Muslim. But what makes the particularity of NST in your eyes?
Me too. I have a question to Mr. Jonathan.
So I was doing research on the Murid community, doing research on nonviolence, asking whether or not there are Muslims who practice nonviolence. And just simply, I was doing that research starting in 2016. So NST was created and came into being in the middle of my field work. And I had the blessing of meeting some of the leaders early on. And then you all, like you and many others, welcomed me into your midst, and I found you living out what your tariqa says you should do, and so it made it interesting to focus on you.
Great, thank you.
Simple answer.
Mr. Jonathan?
Mr. Bousso.
Sure.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Jonathan. I say hi again.
Hey, brother.
Okay, yeah.
It's been so long.
My follow-up question is, what do you think in the future, what we can do, as you mentioned before, to say Bamba everywhere? And what do you think is the meaning of Bamba everywhere? What do you think is the meaning of that? Because what I think is the meaning is to bring the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba to the communities. But it's not only by the name, Bamba everywhere by the name only. What do you think about that? That's my question.
Yeah, well, so myself, as a dedicated Christian, I want Jesus to be known everywhere, right? But obviously almost everybody in the world's already heard that name. So I don't just mean the name, right? I want to see people living and acting the way he wants them to act. So when I hear in the Murid community, when I hear people saying Bamba Fi, Bamba Fe, Bamba Fip,
yes,
or quoting the verse from his poetry that you quoted, that they'll hear his teaching in their own language. My understanding is that Bamba everywhere, when NST members are saying that, is just very simply that many people would benefit from his teaching and follow his teaching about what it means to be a healthy, good person, a person in right relationship with God. I think that's what you mean, but you guys have to tell me, because I'm just listening.
That's what I mean.
But
That's all.
I also think that what Hadim Busso is raising is a sociological moment we have to pay attention to. The case of the universality of Bamba is a new phenomenon, which is mostly attached to two waves of migrants. The first wave is the wave of Murid settling in Senegalese cities, African cities. And the second wave is the Murid diaspora all over the world. And this created a shift. In the early phase, and all the literature in that period shows it, the Murid tried to specifically stay in Bawol and Kayor. They didn't want to go outside. And it was a kind of very powerful local ideology. And Islam which pays attention to something which is local. This is the first. And, again, you see the literature, you see it. The second wave, the wave of universality, it's a moment where what Hadim Busso was saying, Bamba everywhere becomes a slogan. One of my colleagues did this wonderful exhibit, which is called Saint in the City, which is about the presence of Bamba and Bamba's images in Dakar. It was done by Richard Roberts. And one thing which is fascinating is, and this is still the problem, I think, even among the MST, the tension between, on one hand, universalism being present outside, and the other tension, which is the tension of retaining identity, which is specific. And the specificity of the identity is what you show, the way in which people are dressing, the way in which the body is sticking to who you are. I think these are very important. It's why I was asking the question about why peace. Why not race? Because race is as important as peace in Bamba's approach. And in a country like the US, where racialization is institutionalized, this could be a narrative to deal with the integration of young Murid in this space. And it's why I think we need to pay more attention to the environment, because it's three elements in the environment: the wider American society, the African American society, and the Muslim groups in the US. And the Murid MST will have to deal with that, these two groups, and how dealing with these two groups allow them to shape, because it's about that, to shape an identity which is effective. Not only here, because they are supposed also to maintain the relation with Senegal, to a relation with Touba. So these are problems which are very, very important. And I'm sure that the MST is dealing with, because it's about producing a new culture which is informed by Bamba's lessons. It's not about using
Exactly.
on
Exactly.
is about adjusting it to a different environment.
You're right.
So these are the questions for me which are important. You raise, Hadim and Binto raise, but these are critical questions, which will change necessarily the structure of engaging with that. And I think these are very important issues to discuss. I can discuss it, of course, because I am not a Murid. I am not a Murid, and I was born in a colonial city. So, but I have written.
But thank you for your nice witness.
Yeah, and I have written in the early phase. I wrote a paper which is quite interesting.
And also the real Murid is the real Muslim. The Murid is the real Muslim. One of the reasons why Serigne Touba doesn't call people to a tariqa, he called them to Islam. He say, Allah say, when you call people to Islam, that's mean when they are Murid, that's mean they are Muslims. If you are Muslim, you Murid. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's just about which kind of conversation we can have. And again, it's going back to the idea of the possibility of the emergence of an American Murid identity, which is also what historians are discussing. Can we talk about an American African community different from the African American community? It's also a debate, and what it means is very, very important. Today, Indian scholars are saying that the Indian community back in India is reimagining itself, borrowing idea from the Indian diaspora. This is also something which is possible. So what does it mean? What are the resources used? How they are used and received in the community is important. Again, what I was saying is what I have studied, the period I have studied about the Murids, what I am actually defending is the idea that Murid cosmopolitanism is borrowing from Murid resources, not from global resources. Jonathan is saying, looking at the NST, that something new is appearing, which is much more linked to the West and the presence in the West than borrowing from, bowel traditions. So this is also something important to deal with.
Yes, Mr. Juf, if I may interview, if I'm being heard right now, you touched on a very important, and I'm thankful for mentioning that. I think with the Bamba FIP, Bamba feed, Bamba everywhere, my understanding of it really as a young Murid is really the universality of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba's message, really. Because if you look at his writings, such as Sindi, if you look at the writings of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, where he says, Irham Jamiyar Wara, that universe has been taught by us, by our Shaykh himself. So he made reference to the Torah, he made reference to the Injil, he made reference to all the books. So us as being true to the teachings of our Shaykh, we could no longer help but to bring the message everywhere, because that's the point of view of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba as he was writing. Now, NST is an organization worldwide. We have people that are requesting to be a member in Saudi Arabia, in China, in Senegal. We have even non-Muslims that are part of sympathizing with our message. And I think what it shows over there is really shows that we were born within that context. And when it comes to our relationship with the Western world, my complete view about that is it's nothing new to us. And Alhamdulillah, I think we were able to beautifully highlight the two different if we can call it that, which is two different lifestyles, which is the Murid lifestyle and the American lifestyle. But us being conscious and being here in the United States, in our mind, it's one, and it always has been the same. And the reading I have that is just the situation where I saw our Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, as we know him, completely lived with the Western man and the colonialist. All his writings, when you see, he's walking constantly in being accompanied by the Western man. So that is not a foreign concept for us. It's not a foreign concept for him to be in a foreign land and have to identify himself as a Muslim and as a Murid. So I think it's a continuation. Even now, it's just a different land for us, but the concept itself is not foreign. Even in Senegal, we do the same battle, where in Dakar, in a foreign land per se, because our teachings are not completely being implemented in Dakar. However, when we go to Touba, you can see us really fully embody the teachings of our Sheikh. So that lifestyle and the geography where we are, yes, it is something we can pay attention to, but consciously, wherever we go is Touba for us. Wherever we go, we are Murid, regardless of the situation. I think the real question, and probably Mr. Jonathan can help me answer that, is how can we get an awareness? How can we raise awareness of our situation as Murids? How can we be respected just being Murid citizens, Murid Americans, and not being seen as a different vague of people, a different kind of people? How can we be here and fully live our Muridism without being labeled or per se another type of American? Maybe he can help us find ways where we can be fully integrated within the American life and be recognized as such, inshallah.
I know that we are past.
We are going to, but this is a good question, but it's not gonna, you have to read Sheikh Babu.
Yeah, absolutely.
You will find responses to your questions. Sheikh Babu has written on that. And Senegalese scholars has widely written on how Murids, the Murid diaspora, adjust to different situations. And one comparison which could be very interesting is a book which was published in 1995 by an African-American anthropologist, which is called States of Grace, which is about the Murids in Italy. And he's already raising all the questions you are raising about this Muslim elite reinventing an identity. But if you are too young to remember, in the 90s, the Khalif General Abdullah Mbake decided to ban the Fédération des étudiants Mourides en Europe. And the discussion was against the tension between what is universal and what is local in the lesson of Bamba's. The attempt to make Bamba's lesson universal and rethink the lessons was a very important thing. And it's created a crisis. This is also something. So you have a long history in which many of the questions you are raising are being raised and debated within, the Murid community and outside the Murid communities by scholars from all over the world. You know, the Murids are probably the most studied group in the sociology, anthropology, and history of Senegalese sociological group. You have a huge library about that. And it's important to go back and revisit them and try to have a sense of how, it's not, I'm not saying that they are saying, some are saying things which are good, some are saying things which are, but it exists and it's need to be revisited. Jonathan.
Doctor, maybe before Jonathan go ask that question, we have few people that want to ask questions. Before that, I'm going to read a question that came through. How do we unite African American communities and the Senegalese Murid community. Hold that thought, and then let's have Makoto Fall open your mic and ask your question. Really very short question. If it's a commentary, don't open your mic. Go ahead.
So I can comment only briefly on that to say that in my research, I realized that there are fewer African Americans involved in the Murid community today than there were in the past. So if I look at the research other people did, I look at the documents, I see that there are fewer African Americans today. It probably has something to do with the leadership of Muhammad Baluzi, Alhaji Baluji. His leadership was a very strong tie to the African American community. With his death, I think there was a real loss. How to re-bridge that gap, I don't know, but that certainly would be a challenge for you all.
I think I would just like to add that intellectually it's something which is being bridged. One of the best today's African American scholars of African history is an African American who's called, his name is Butch War. And his next book is actually a translation of Ahmadou Bamba's poems. And he has written a great book which is called The Walking Islam, which is a history of Muslim education in the last 1,000 years.
The Walking Quran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was published 5 years ago.
We did invite him, but he's traveling currently. That's why he didn't join. Makoto, you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation, for this panel. Actually, this is Makoto Fall. So I'm a PhD student here at the University of Florida. So I also do some research on the Murid, basically on the Dahiras. But one question I have is going to be online with what Professor is saying, and it's about basically why the emphasis on this transnational? Because if you take a look at Shaykh Anta Babu's article, Urbanizing Mystical Islam, so he's giving you a reason for the establishment of urban dahiras in Dakar. And those reasons we had like the marginalization, so of Murids in Dakar before the 60s. And then you have, some other reason like basically preventing them from organizing, any kind of event in Dakar. So in this transnational space, so I see more or less, it's not like the same context. Murids are not kind of experiencing marginalization, if I may say so, because this context is quite open, and they have certain freedom, certain liberty to organize, to be in groups. Mika is right here, so they have this label as being a non-profit organization. So that is kind of giving them some leverage. So, what do you see in terms of pedagogy that makes maybe, because the roots is still in Senegal, so I don't see the roots of NST located here. So the roots are basically in the daras, in rural daras. So you have this, let's say, relationship between rural, urban, and from the urban to maybe, transnational. So how do you see the display, beside the symbols and the invocation and the emphasis on the hitma? Where do you fit in this pedagogical aspect in the day-to-day experience and action? Thank you.
You need to unmute, Jonathan. I muted you because you have an echo.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for your question. I'm not entirely sure I understood all the aspects of your question, but the shortest answer to the question, what is religious transnationality, is that when people move, they take their religion with them. And so, yes, Murids draw their everything straight from Touba. but they live in New York, they live in Atlanta, they live in Rome. And like it or not, locality begins to press upon people and assert itself into their lives, and they're transformed by that experience. And so today you have a dynamic situation where there's strong and healthy Murid communities in many places in the world, communicating with each other. So things that happen in New York are quickly reported in Jurbel and vice versa. So there's a real flow of information and ideas and practices back and forth. So, you know, I heard Murids in New York chanting, "Bamba owns New York." Well, after some research and conversations, I realized people are also chanting that in Dakar and Chess. So this is a very dynamic field of sociology and faith, and the local situation impressing itself upon Murids wherever they're at.
Thank you. Do you have any other question or comments?
Yeah, you have Lamin Make. If you wanna share something.
Okay. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Okay. Okay, I'm very sorry to something like this. I appreciate the discussion. Interesting. But there's one point I wanted to make regarding, I heard regarding that there are less and less African Americans joining the Murid community than before. I talk about biology's living. But I sense also that in my travel in the diaspora, I think young Murids are very eager to spread the teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, and they're very proud of themselves. But sometimes I think they try to impose the wall of culture to new converts, be they Americans or Italians or whatever. And I think Murids, the Murids, which is based on true Islam, is cross-cultural. So I think maybe the youngsters should make more an effort to spread the teachings, but knowing that an American is an American. An American doesn't necessarily eat on the floor by his hand. I mean, these are like cultural things, and I think Islam goes beyond cross-cultural things. I mean, if you look at the what they call the Maqasid Sharia, the objectives of Islam, you realize that in any civilization, if you're from Jurbel, from Touba, from Sweden, or from America, you can be a true Murid, but using your own culture. I think there's an effort that needs to be made on that side. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I think it's an important question, but it's also a question which raises the issue of the identity of the Muridiyya as an expression which is radically Wolof. We like it or not. So the issue again is an issue of adaptation, is an issue of, integrating, acculturating, or assimilating. These are also questions, NST, whatever new culture is being brought here, will have to address. It's about how do you do that? Because probably a lot of people who are attracted by the Muridiyya are attracted by the way in which Islam is understood through a culture, which is a wall of culture, we like it or not. And how do you deal with that is important. Again, one of Professor Babu's mentor, Professor David Robinson, has been writing about, is Islam Africanized or Africa Islamized? So the tension between the two processes is an important tension to pay attention to.
I really liked Lamin's intervention. I think he makes a very important point. One I've observed over and over in my research is, for example, I witnessed a young African-American woman say the Shahada and join Islam and join the Muridiyya. But she doesn't speak Wolof. And at the event, every single aspect of the evening where she was, everything happened in Wolof language only, except for when the Imam made sure she understood what she was saying in the Arabic Shahada, and he repeated it for her in English. So how does a young woman like that become an active murid if she doesn't speak Wolof and she doesn't know anything about Senegalese culture? So Lamin, you raised a very significant question.
Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much for, again, emphasizing that question. I think even us as youth, this has been also a challenge for us. And I'm glad that, you know, we can see that you're paying attention to the same challenges. So it's a gleaming light for us as well. I remember one time, one of our goals was to have a lounge, like a Murid lounge, where it could be a place where we could just serve coffee tuba, have a big screen where people can come and watch the news, and just have our bean bags laying around, very informal. I think we were trying to kind of like bring our American side of it. A place where we don't have to come and be completely outside of our daily life of Harlem. And unfortunately, that goal we haven't reached yet. We are still trying. And it was a way for us to be able to unite all Murids. This is heartbreaking. It's a travesty when we see that the people that we really think that in the future will be carrying, will be the standard bearer of Muridism here, which are the Americans, you know, we still have to face that challenge. So we are calling on our elders to really help us. We are doing in NST is that we have our website, which is ndawi-touba.org, and over there we are trying to bridge, you know, the gap, and hopefully we will be able to succeed in the coming years, inshallah.
All right. The interest is pretty high, and I like the dynamics. We are half an hour already past the time. I'll take one question from Golden Gilawar. Your comment, you can type it, but a quick question because we have a long day ahead.
Yeah.
Gilawar. Then I give the mic back to Dr. Juf.
Thank you very much, Sidi. I think that this panel was a great panel with many questions, but also many answers. But I think what we have unveiled, which is really important, is processes in which social actors are trying to deal with issues which are issues about the future of the next generation, not only of the next generation of the Murids, but of the next generation of West Africa. What it shows also is the importance of religion. The importance of religion has a kind of double instrument, an instrument to shape its singular identity, but an instrument which could allow you also to be included in a larger society. And what are the consequences of this double pressure? Pressure is something important we'll have to deal with. To address one question, this is the question of an American Muridiyya. Is it possible to reconcile values which are coming from different culture? Is it possible to deal with the impact of the environment in which people are settling on their tradition? But is it possible also to use, this is the whole discussion about peace, to use their tradition to affect the environment in which they are living? And these are questions which are in front of us. And the responses, NST is one of them, but the responses are different. I think that it's impossible to say that you have one view of the Murids about how do you deal with the American environment. You have people who are, and I think it's what is happening with the elite. I just mentioned that Don Carter has already shown that what happened in Italy in the 90s was the consequence of the emergence of a Murid elite, which is educated, which try to universalize Murid, which try to open a new discussion. And it's interesting because he's saying they are acting like Southern Italian coming in North Italy, that it's a kind of a process of adjusting to the Italian and adjusting their ideology. Another thing which Jonathan said, but which many scholars have said, I have written about that what is interesting, and this is probably the most important challenge which we have discussed, is you have a generation which is settling in this country, and it's a generation of citizens, and they are acting differently from the early generation, which was not necessarily planning to stay. So I think that what we need to, and I hope, and I'm sure that the NST will do the work. I know that Serigne Mamoun Mbake is very interested on that. But these are questions which are defined by uncertainty. We don't know the trajectory, but we have to look at it and we have to work on it. And the pedagogical aspect, which is one of the critical lessons of Ahmadou Bamba, is very, very important to pay attention to. That the teaching, what are young Murid taught in the US and how it is taught to them, bearing in mind that they are in an environment which is actually an environment which could derail them. So what does it mean? It means that this is a critical intervention, and the NST is absolutely a critical instrument to address the many, many challenges migrants, being Murid or not, are facing in this country. So I would like to thank Jonathan, to thank Ada Binta Job, to thank Hadim Bousso for helping us have a very, very productive discussion by shaping it and providing the necessary information. So thank you very much. And I would like to thank Sidi also for the great job he has done to put together these many panels. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think, Professor,